Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tabletop Cyberpunk. My name is JonJonTheWise. This is the podcast about Cyberpunk 2020 in red, the tabletop games, and everything in between, whatever I want to talk about and have fun with. Today, I have two very special guests in the Cyberpunk community, the Cyberpunk Red podcast community, and they are here, the No Latency crew. I have with me Binary Dragon.
Hello.
And he has brought fellow player and friend Peter, aka Spoon.
Hey.
He said you were Peter Spoon, so I didn't know if that had to be a part of the Peter, aka Spoon, or do you just go by Spoon?
Spoon is what I go by on most of my social media. So.
Okay, cool. I like that. All right. Well, we're going to dive deep into the No Latency crew, and we're going to talk to them. We're going to talk Cyberpunk. We're going to have a lot of fun. But before we get into that, make sure you guys join the Discord community. The link is in the description below. Make sure you guys join my Patreon, patreon.com/JonJonTheWise. If you want to show some support to your boy, that's the best way to do it. Follow me on social media, at JonJonTheWise on everything, even TikTok. I'm doing Warhammer stuff on TikTok now.
Oh, sick.
Yeah, that's like my secondary hobby
Oh, cool. We should talk about Warhammer. I got some stuff to say.
All right, let's do that. And I apologize in advance that we're going to be talking about Warhammer, guys, because there's a lot of groaning going on because I literally never shut up about it. Like I got my Bellacore right here, you know?
Let's have an off-topic section.
Exactly. And there was one more thing that I forgot. Oh, yeah, of course. Make sure you guys subscribe to the YouTube channel where you're either watching this, but if you're listening to the podcast, that's where I make most of my content for Cyberpunk. And that's about it. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you guys coming on. I love seeing new creators that I've never seen before in the community that are doing Cyberpunk stuff. I love uplifting other creators, and it's great to see you guys. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Yeah, I'm super excited just to talk about the game and what we're doing. It's awesome. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, we don't really have any topics or anything planned. We're just gonna go talk about our favorite game and other favorite games, because you can't just have one favorite game, or else you're not gonna be good. You wouldn't be good at being a Cyberpunk game master if that's the only game you play.
No, variety is the spice of life.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah. So, but before we get into that, why don't you guys please plug everything? Plug the podcast, the Twitch, whatever it is, anything.
So,
what are we doing?
What do we do? We make a podcast called No Latency. I call it a Cyberpunk Red roleplay podcast. A lot of people call them actual plays. We make this fun story, heavily edited. So we really edit it down. So don't expect your games to run like this. They don't. Our games last a lot longer, and we bring it down so that it's entertaining, not just for the people who listen to Cyberpunk and play the game themselves, but also for people who are just nerdy and maybe want to have a look at what other RPGs are like. And hopefully ours, with it being a bit more pared down, you can get a grasp of it. And then when you're playing it, you naturally have that crunch. We take the crunch out on purpose. Mm-hmm. And you can check us out on all of the podcast services. No Latency is the address. NoLatency.fm. Anchor.fm/No Latency. And you can follow me on Twitch at binary_dragon. And there's a Twitter there as well. Check that stuff out.
Yeah.
And Spoon's awesome.
Spoon, anything else you want to add?
No, just to listen. And because just like Binary said, I think what kind of puts us apart from other role-playing podcasts, other actual plays, other Cyberpunk content, is that we do edit it down. And that's not a bad thing. That's actually, in my opinion, I think that's a good thing. I think that totally kind of elevates it to, if you're anything like me, and if you're listening to this, you're probably a huge nerd just like the rest of us. And if you listen to audiobooks, it's why not just have an audiobook that is based off of a role-playing game that you already love and might already play, and has sweet editing done by Binary with crazy cool. Like you have like the gunshots are in there. You have music. You have like all the sound effects of Night City and everything around it. It really elevates it to a whole new level. So listen to it if you're not already.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to mention they're available on Spotify. If anybody's listening to, most of my listeners are listen from Spotify. So if you guys want to listen to the podcast, the No Latency podcast is on Spotify as well. And yeah, you'll enjoy that. Let's talk about actual
Appreciate
plays.
the plug.
Of course. I like to do it in the beginning because user retention is the highest in the beginning. We're cheating the system right now.
Please don't leave though. This is going to be fun.
It's too late.
So
they've left.
Oh no, come back.
It's too late. There's nothing you can do. Some of them are like, these guys suck. Who cares? Why am I here? Why do I even like Cyberpunk? But
there's no keeping them.
No, there's no keeping them. But I wanted to talk to you guys about actual plays because I've been a fan of actual plays for a really long time. Even before I started making content, I listened to like D&D podcasts. I listened to, all kinds of other ones. And what I've realized like over the years, in the past when I did actual plays, I thought, I'll just record it. We'll play it on Twitch. I'll record it. Just upload that 5-hour long video onto YouTube and people will love it. Yeah, I was completely wrong. I don't know why I thought anybody would like that. And I don't want this to be like me shitting on other people doing that because a lot of people do that. But I realized... I
will say,
yes,
I think that's interesting live.
It is interesting live, but...
The moment it's recorded, I think it loses something.
Also, I realized that you can't just put it on your friends to perform. You know what I mean? Not everybody's a performer. Some of your friends, they just want to play and they go along with it as long as your expectations are low, which your expectations have to be low of your friends. You're like, hey, I'm recording.
My friends are the worst.
Exactly. You got to be like, hey.
Wow, thanks.
I can feel the love already. Spoon, you're the best one, so don't worry. He wouldn't say that about you. But the idea is that, sometimes we just want to play and we just want to have fun. Other times we're putting on a show, and I think that's what's different about actual plays. You know what I mean?
Yes. And it's something that I really thought of because I'm from England. I currently live on the west coast of America in California. And I'm I know, I noticed that. I didn't want to DDoS you, but
yeah, people can track me down already if there's some creep out there.
Californian, that's great. But I grew up around radio plays, which here in America just don't exist. My stepfather did a lot of radio plays when I was younger, and I listened to them a lot, which is why when I moved to podcasts, I listened to people talking, and I listened to stories that people tell. And I love the storytelling medium of audio. It's incredible.
Yeah.
But it also lets you cheat, and I love cheating. And I don't mean I'm cheating in the game. I mean I'm cheating in the way that you present that story. Because as you're saying, you can't have a long story. The issue you have is that there's actually, in my opinion, again, this is all my opinion. I make a podcast. If you like it, maybe these opinions matter to you.
Yeah.
I don't know. But the idea is that you've got two groups of people to make sure that they feel value. One of them's your audience. The other one's your players. Mm-hmm. And this is something that I actually had to think about for a minute. And one of the things I did was I created maps and I created letters that people would get because we're all at distance because of the whole Panasonic that just happened.
Yeah. Panasonic.
And so I wanted those letters to have the same kind of feeling they would have. I don't know if you're allowed to let me share this. Can I share this?
Yeah. Can you share it on your screen? I think you can with Zoom, right?
Host disabled, participant screen sharing.
Oh, well, I don't want you doing it. All right?
Tech.
How do I enable it?
I have no idea. Zoom's weird.
Yeah, I didn't even know I disabled it. See? Oh, wait,
Welcome
security.
to Zoom troubleshooting with JonJonTheWise.
Enable share screen. Here we go. I gave you the power.
I have the power. Right, so what I've got here is a letter that Iona gets early on. So this is a letter that Iona got. And we use Roll20, so it was just a handout that I gave them. And when Iona receives this, Iona, or rather Jade, Skull or Jade, if you're interested in them, they have a Twitch as well on all the socials, Skull or Jade.
Oh, and sorry to interrupt you, but for podcast listeners, we're looking at a yellow handout sheet that has Biotechnica font and letterhead on it. So it looks like a legitimate to an employee. It says like employee number IP 1313. And this is like a handout that they would give you from Biotechnica. It's actually really beautiful.
it's a message that Iona gets. And I've made templates for all the companies that are involved in the story that we're telling. And so I give these out when players get messages, and I know that they're going to get a message. I try and set up something tangible. If I was in person as a GM, I'd like, I was doing Dungeons & Dragons, you might cover a note with tea leaves and make a map so they can have something to feel right.
Yeah.
But we're in the future, and Cyberpunk's a bit different. And so I've played with QR codes. So the QR code on this works.
Oh, wow. Really? What does it open up?
Do it. Get your phone out and scan it. So the idea behind this was that if they're in the cyberpunk world, I'll keep vamping. If they're in the cyberpunk world, right, they can go up to this in their own. They've got a thing in their hand. The character does. And in my head, I thought, wouldn't it be cool if while we're playing, they're holding an object and they can scan it, and then it opens up a second message that Iona gets on the device that they're holding in their hand, so it feels like their tile. And it's only going to happen once every few sessions. I try not to do it too much, not because of the expectation, but because it's not like super interesting to listen to.
Yeah.
But I do the same with, let's stop showing that. And I do the same with the maps. This will be the last thing I show you.
Real quick, I just want to say one of my favorite details that I don't even think that we haven't talked about this on the podcast at all. And we haven't even talked about it like in reality, but binary, I love the little detail that you put on almost everything, which is, you can see it at the bottom of this map right here as well. It says, do not retweet.
Yeah. From Biotechnica, like their PR department.
Yeah, everything has
confidential. Do not retweet. I love how, like, apparently even in Cyberpunk, their Twitter is still around and is still a giant conglomeration takedown. I'm sure that in the future, No Latency crew will take down Twitter.
It's on the cards. Absolutely.
That's great. I love it.
So I've got like different styles for Arasaka, because it's really Arasaka and Biotechnica who we're dealing with the most at the moment. There's a little bit of channel Network 54 as well. Mm-hmm. But this is the map that they go through in the there's this little Satellite Station 7 arc they go through. And that starts on the episode labeled Welcome to Biotechnica. And they go into this base. And what I've got here is something that's really easy to talk about. So you've got one room on the top floor, 3 rooms on the second floor, 3 rooms on the third floor, and so on. Yeah. So that when they're talking about it, they're like, oh, there's a room on the left and a room on the right. So that when you're listening to this, it's tangible. But they are all looking at the same thing. And because I made this for them, hopefully they know that I care about them enough that they're part of the entertainment too. They get to have these things. We have cameos from some of our other friends who are content creators, because getting people all to record at the same time is difficult.
It's very difficult, yeah.
And what we do is we do those spots asynchronously. So I'll record with the other person at a different time, create a little thing. And so we have one of our friends is a Network 54 newscaster. And every now and again, they're talking about stuff that the crew has done in previous episodes. Yeah. And then we have like a little gag that we'll do a pun about some musical, because that content creator does a lot of musical stuff. And so we have like little things like that to try and tackle that problem of trying to entertain your audience, which isn't actually that hard, but if you focus on them, then the game gets shorter and you are redoing bits like, oh, that was good, but could you say it this way because it needs to be blah.
Yeah, I found that in Cyberpunk. First of all that stuff is beautiful.
Oh, actually, and the other thing about this is I was inspired to do this by you.
What? What did I do?
When I was watching your actual play, the one that's on your channel a few videos down.
Yeah, okay.
There was this stack that you had of locations. Bing, 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 bing.
Oh, yeah.
And I loved that. It was so cool.
Was that with the Baby Beard crew?
I think so.
Of Heaven?
Yeah, it's been a minute because I watched it a little bit after it came out. And I was like, oh yeah, that's cool, because if I'm just listening, there's not like a map. And that's what you have to avoid if you're making it. If you're going to make an actual play, don't have a map.
Yeah.
Unless you're doing it live. Because you mentioned this on one of your other podcasts, how you kind of really give enemies a tally of health.
Yeah, if I have too many players, I don't just sit there and like do the armor ablation and HP. If I have like 6 players, I just do tally marks for killing bad guys and stuff like that, because it's too much to go through.
Well, I think that it kind of goes into the whole, like, when you're making something to be enjoyed by an audience, it kind of helps to keep things more abstract, right? Because if you get down into the minutia, don't get me wrong, it's great for like when you're playing, when you're at a table surrounded by your friends, you got the drinks, you got the snacks, and you got the all the terrain ahead of you. It's great to have all that minutia and tiny details, but when you're listening to it, you don't have as a listener that piece of paper in front of you. You don't have as a listener that terrain in front of you, and so it loses that magic, I think, if you get too much down into the minutia. And so, like what you were saying, Binary, with like playing towards your audience and playing towards your players is such an interesting dynamic to have, and really only exists in the actual play podcast genre.
Yeah.
And
for the record, audio listeners, if you do want to see this, there's lots of examples on No Latency's Instagram.
Yes,
that might help. I just realized. Yes.
Yeah, but keeping it abstract just makes it flow faster and really allows the listener to kind of fill in those blanks that the players are already doing on their own.
Yeah, filling in the blanks is really important. I've realized that if you take too much time with your narration and exposition, you kind of lose your players and your audience. It's like, okay, I get it. You're at a building. How much more of the building do you want to describe, But if you just give them a few adjectives and like one or two adjectives in one sentence, you can spark the inspiration in their brain to fill in the blanks, Yeah. So like,
go on.
I was going to say, like, if you go to like an ominous corporate building, you can say a corporate building with blacked out windows that shoots into the sky like a spire lays before you enter it. That gives you this like, oh man, we're at an evil place. Like this is a bad spot. And then, people might even imagine lightning coming down.
Yeah.
That thing, you know what I mean?
And on our podcast, I might add it in the audio.
Well,
Exactly.
I think it just goes to say...
Go on, Spoon.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say that I think that the reason that we can do that is because all of us have such a large breadth of popular culture that we're always pulling from, And so, like, I'm sure that back in Gary Gygax's time, there was a lot less of content that people were consuming on the daily.
Oh, yeah.
And so like going into the details of being like, this hallway has it's cobblestone and there are paintings on either side. One of them has a matriarchal figure and the other one is a demon being slayed by a heroic protagonist.
Now as a player, sorry to cut you off, I'm like, oh, these are important paintings. I need to remember them. And really they're just like inconsequential.
Yeah.
But now you can just say, imagine a dimly lit corridor. It's dark and dank and smells of copper. And you're like, boom, got it. I've seen Labyrinth, I've seen Star Wars, if we're doing it more sci-fi, and I've maybe played Cyberpunk, so I know already what I'm in for. And so you can just cut that short, boom, 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 and get right into the important stuff.
And I can tell you the color of the stones in my mind, of the cobblestone. I could tell you the colors that you haven't told me. I've filled in those blanks. And I can look down the hallway and see that there's like a dark abyss down at the end of this hallway. And you didn't even give me that. You just gave me a little bit, and my brain filled in the rest of it. And I think that's really important as even if you're not doing an actual play as a game master, the whole it's all about time management. How much time do you want to spend on this corridor when you could be spending time on your player's backstory, on creating plot points that they'll remember for the rest of their lives, and for really giving you a little bit of a break from all of your preparation, because you'll go insane trying to prepare too much.
Yeah. One of that happened on an episode. I was editing an episode and I was like, wow, I talked for 4 minutes. 4 minutes. And I was like, I can't edit this down.
Yeah.
And that's where the idea for these asynchronous things happens. Because what I did is I created an audio version of a scream sheet about this place called the Train in our story. And it's like somebody found somebody tapped into an access point in the bar that they're in. And I was like, and I re-recorded a line and like told, it was actually Jade who opened the message. I told Jade, I was like, hey, I'm doing this. Is this okay? They were like, yeah, it's fine. That's good. And It's just like, I took 4 minutes down to 1 minute. It's just, I put on a Western accent, the train, and then did all this like,
Mm-hmm.
just had this music playing in the back and just made it like essentially an advert for the thing. And that solved my issue because it is in world.
Yeah.
And that's,
I think
those
that
are the
was one of
ways that
first
you
times
can
you did
keep
that.
your audience with you, is if you make your things in world.
Yeah.
Instead of going as the GM, this room is very big and there's a robot. Like, all right. But if you can get maybe an NPC to tell you about it,
Oh yeah.
that's cool. Because
Yeah.
then you get character and you get their opinion of it, and that can be neat.
Yeah, and then the players meet that NPC and like they meta knowledge know things about him, and then they ask
Exactly.
questions to that NPC. So yeah, it's a lot of fun doing all that stuff. I think there needs to be a healthy balance of like entertainment as far as actual plays go. Entertainment, and then the other balance is making sure that your players have fun. Because if you guys have fun, that chemistry it shows, you know, and people can relate to it. They love listening to you guys. They love your banter, and all that stuff is really important too.
I agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Making actual plays is hard, by the way. It's not easy.
It is.
It's very difficult.
Especially. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say that, like, kind of shifting gears a little bit, I think that's another thing that really plays into the whole actual play thing. And I'm convinced that you kind of hinted at this earlier, John, that you shouldn't have a lot of high expectations for your players on an actual, like, just your friends to be essentially actors, right?
Yeah.
Performers.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're doing. If you're making an actual play, you are participating in a performance, which is totally different than a game. And don't get me wrong, just playing Cyberpunk is very fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like, get your friends together, sit down every Tuesday night and play Cyberpunk with your friends, and don't record it, because that's a different thing. But if you do want to create an actual play, there is a certain understanding that you have to have, that you maybe shouldn't just play with your friends. You should create an experience that is meant to be consumed, and that is a performance. And like, that's where I think that, like, I come from a performance background, Jade comes from a performance background, Evan comes from a performance background. Most of our players
so does Kendall, so do I.
So does
like, we all do.
There you go. Okay, we all do.
Everyone on the podcast.
I wasn't sure about
Everyone on the
Kendall.
podcast comes from a performance background. And Jade, Evan, and Kendall are all on a D&D podcast called Save the D8, which is on over 100 episodes at this point.
Shout out.
It's been going for a very, very long time. Yes, which hashtag always be plugging. And I stole two of the players and the GM for this, because I'm just stealing their experience. Why not?
Hey,
that's the kind of cheating I'm
okay.
okay
You didn't steal anything, all right? They wanted to play Cyberpunk as much as you wanted to make them play
true.
it.
Yeah.
It was more convincing than stealing.
Yeah.
But like, there is a definite difference there that, and it also translates into how the game plays, right? I mean, like, I say play, but really what it is that if you're making an actual play, at least this is kind of the philosophy that we've taken on No Latency, is that we're using the rules of the game to tell a story in which we have an audience in mind, right? And because of that, you don't necessarily, like, I know that Binary can speak to this more than I can, but there are certain rules that we just kind of hand wave. And there are certain things that we don't really worry about. And then we'll go on, instead of, spending 2 hours on a combat, which if you're playing at a table can be super fun.
So much fun.
Yeah.
So much fun. It's great. You can get, like, the Overwatch rules, and you can get really nitty gritty onto like called shots and stuff like that. But when you're playing on an actual play, it's way more fun to get down to the drama of it and be like, oh my gosh, like, this person is hurt. This person needs help. This person is going out of their way to do something risky and stupid, but will it work out?
Oh, you mean your character, Spoon, all the time?
I mean,
I like how he mentioned it for a reason.
Yeah, he did. Grappling
like,
hook down a blooming elevator shaft, you crazy bastard.
Yeah, don't worry about that. But I just think that, like, when you're doing an actual play, it's much more interesting to get to know the characters and to be more invested in that interpersonal connections that they have with the other players and stuff, which you don't necessarily, like. It's kind of weird if you're playing at a table and you start going off on, like, how your player wants your character wants to go do this thing, and another player is disagreeing with you, and you're having this whole, like, interpersonal conflict,
Yeah.
it's a little kind of sketchy at a table because you're like, are we actually fighting like as people or just in character? But when you're doing it as part of a show, it's like, oh, I get it. It's like you're on stage. You have to really imagine yourself on a stage, almost as if it were an improv show.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
we
exactly
are definitely, when you make actual play, you are dipping your toe into improv.
Yeah,
Good
you
luck.
have to. You have to. I mean, even just playing with your buddies, it's all improvisation. No matter how much you prepare, I always tell like people when they want to like get advice from me for like their campaign. Sometimes people make the mistake of like, oh, the players will go here and then they'll talk to this guy and then this guy will give them that thing. And I'm always like, dude, you're relying on too many, paths that you think that your players will take. They might just say, fuck that guy. Like, I don't like him. He doesn't look good. Let's ask somebody else. And then
dude,
now
I've written up sheets for characters that died within minutes.
That's why I don't do it anymore. I've been hurt in the past.
Bullshit.
I've been hurt in the past that I'm like, dude. And then the throwaway characters that I literally, oh man, I had this one character. Shit, I forgot her name. I think her name was Roxy or something like that. But she was in a party gang and she was an ally of one of my players. And basically the way I had her character be is just like she's always down for a good time. So like he would call her and say like, hey, we got something here. She doesn't even need to know the details. She's like, I'm coming, I'm bringing drugs, let's do it. And then she would show up, coked out of her mind, do like lines of coke on the hood of the van and stuff like that. And the players loved her. But that's it. That's all I had for the character. I didn't have anything else. I didn't even have her name fully. I just had Roxy or something like that. And they were like, at the end of the session, they were like, man, that Roxy was really cool. I hope we get to see her again. And I was like, okay, well, now I gotta sit here and like make a whole life story about this person. What party gang are they from? Who else is in that gang? What are their motivations? And screw all the other bullshit that I wrote about for my players.
I mean, let's be honest. You can always steal the motivations from one of those characters in the trash can.
100%.
And be like, this is now for you.
Yeah.
That's just classic GMing right there.
All three of us are GMs, by the way.
Exactly. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Spoon is my GM for when we play Blades in the Dark.
That's awesome, man. You guys have that on actual play too, right? Blades in the Dark. No,
that is very specifically not an actual play game.
Yeah,
we actually talked about that, and I think this kind of goes into the same kind of themes that we're touching on here, and is like we play almost every Monday. We play Blades in the Dark. Great game. Yeah, go play it if you haven't had the chance. But it's like specifically not an actual play. Like we are just playing that for fun, and like there is no. And it is freeing in the sense that, like I mentioned earlier, that when you're doing an actual play, it's good to be like on a stage, you have the limelight on you, you're performing. And when you don't have that, you have the freedom to not be on stage. You can be more silly. You can focus more on like the like dumb characters and dumb situations that you get into and just like have fun. Yeah. Because that's the point of it, right? Yeah. Like when you're playing, you should be playing to have fun. And when you're playing to do an actual podcast, you should be playing to make content. And those can be very different. They can also be very similar, but it's nice to have that kind of escape when you're not performing, in quotes, right?
Yeah.
But I have a question for you, John.
Oh, go on.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Kind of going off of this same theme, like I do think that, GMing for an audience is different than GMing for your friends, but I have definitely learned things from playing and from GMing actual plays that help me with my friends' games. Yeah. So my question to you is, like, what have you noticed? Because you've GM'd actual plays. How have you taken some of those principles from actual plays and transitioned them to help your friendly games be more smooth?
One thing, like main thing that pops to my head is not worrying so much about whether I have the right battle map, whether, if I have the right graphic or the token for the bad guy. On an actual play, we'd have to stop the game and be like, oh, I didn't bring the right map. This is important. It's going on YouTube. People are watching it. So I had something in mind. I need to work on it. But if we're just playing in my basement and we're having a good time, then screw the map, whatever. We'll just explore this idea that spontaneously happened. And if I need to move things along really quickly, actual plays have taught me techniques out of just necessity of how to move things along and get things back on track. You have to do it a lot more, maybe with actual plays, depending on your group. But just so you can get people back on track, like, hey, we're putting on a show, let's get the story going. But in a group setting, when everybody's playing, you see one guy's about to fall asleep and the other one's looking at their phone. You're like, all right, I need to move things along. Ambush.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, every time.
Yeah,
Guy with gun has appeared.
You forgot this is Cyberpunk, huh?
You forgot this is Cyberpunk. We're gonna bring this guy's called Steve. He's gonna fuck you up.
Yeah. But yeah, I was gonna actually ask you guys, do you guys do battle maps, theater of the mind? What's your like main technique, both of you, for your games?
For no latency, I use Roll20's token system.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll put tokens on the maps that we use, and I'll say they're here. We do theater of the mind for the most part, but we use tokens to keep like
track
of damage of things and like how much they have left to live.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a good point, because all that auto calculation and stuff is really handy too. It's just for note keeping. It's not really for anything.
Very
else.
useful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Initiative order on Roll20 is pretty simple.
All that stuff.
The Cyberpunk Red sheets they have for Roll20 aren't the best, but they work pretty well. There is still no MOOC mode, so you do have to make your own sheets for those. But
yeah,
it works.
I mean, I've moved on to Foundry and I'm loving it. Like, Foundry is like this whole new world of virtual tabletop gaming for me. So, but I love that Roll20 is free and everybody could just play.
Oh yeah,
it's the best.
Yeah, I've said this before, but I feel comfortable saying this in a public setting, that it's really too bad that Roll20 is like the virtual tabletop, because it had like, it's sitting on its laurels as far as I'm concerned. Like, it needs, the fact that everybody uses it might be a bad thing, because it is unfortunately not the best.
Yeah. It's old. It's just outdated. That's all it is. There's new tabletops that are just doing things a little bit better. Like Foundry, it has everything Roll20 has plus more.
But I'm convinced that as soon as Wizards of the Coast, like D&D proper, makes their D&D Beyond like a full virtual tabletop, like as soon as they get a grid on their site, Roll20 is going to die, and they're not doing anything about it. And the fact that they don't see it coming is crazy to me.
Yeah, I don't know, man. To be honest with you, I don't know. I think that they're content with the way things are, and they don't want to change anything. And it would be a monumental task to just like redo the whole code. You might even have to just do Roll22. And like part 2, and not even touch that Roll20. You know what I mean?
It might be time for Roll20 to go 2.0.
Yeah,
it might be time.
But Spoon, what do you do? Theater of the mind, battle maps?
So I do a little of both, and I think it depends on the scale of the battle and what's important in that particular fight, right? So like, I think that if you are for instance, I play D&D with my friends every Tuesday-ish, whenever we can actually make it happen in person now that COVID is starting to die down. And for those games, having a grid is fun, but only really makes sense if there are like particular things that I want to focus on. Like, for instance, if we're like fighting on a floating castle, it might be nice to like have the layout there. Okay, like this is the edge. You will fall down if you go over here. Sure. Or this is a parapet that you can climb and get advantage if you're up higher and you're using ranged.
It adds
things like that.
It adds to the story and the scene instead of just being like the minimum default setting of the scene.
Exactly. Yeah. But at the same time, like if it is just something like if it's like a random encounter that I've rolled that, we're sitting at in the middle of a woods and there's like an owlbear that attacks you, then I'll probably just do Theater of the Mind. It's faster, it's quicker, it's straight to the point. And then again, it kind of depends on the system that we're playing. Like I play Blades in the Dark with Binary, like I mentioned, and for that it's almost all Theater of the Mind, except I still try to bring in those environmental attributes, right? So if it is something like we've blown the side of a building out, like I will specifically call back to that in when I'm describing what the NPCs are doing, so that that's constantly in their mind when they're thinking about where they are fighting, right? And then it's great because then they'll be like, I pull a broken piece of wood off of the ground and use it as a weapon. It's like, yes, that's so awesome. Yeah. Like, continue to think outside the box like that and use the environment instead of just being like, if I sneak around him, do I get a sneak attack bonus? And it's like,
I know, I
guess you do.
Yeah.
I mean, look, rule of cool is the way.
It's the only rule.
It's the only rule you need.
Yeah, man.
Rule of cool. I feel like the tables in all of these games are way more important when you're having a conversation with someone. Like when you're trying to persuade someone, that's when those rules are super awesome. And it's almost like actual plays lean on a lot of rule of cool to make them interesting. Yeah. Is just kind of what I'm getting at.
Well, I also like the thing of I want the players to figure things out for themselves, not the characters through their skill checks. Because every RPG has a way where the game master can give away secrets just from a good dice check, you know? Like the player will roll something and they'll be like, I have no clue what we're supposed to do, so I'm just going to roll my dice and hopefully the game master will give me the clue that I need. I like to wait until everybody's completely stumped before I throw anybody a bone. And I want people to figure things out for themselves, even if their character would maybe know something about it. I still think there's something fun about personally figuring things out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, I actually have learned a lot from GMing with Binary, and that is I almost feel like it's almost always better to tell the characters more information. Like I almost like to think of including the players as, you know, co-writers of the TV show, if you will, in quotes.
Yeah.
Like letting them in on the secret, even though their character might know, almost works out better half the time because then they kind of know where the story is going. So like, let's say, let me try to get a good example here. For instance, like, you know, on a lot of TV shows, we'll do like, you'll have the main crew of the good guys, but then halfway through the season or halfway through the episode or something, it'll cut to the point of view of the bad guys as they're scheming to do their own dirty deeds. And like the audience is like, oh, I see. They're going to try to poison the water supply or something. And then we cut back to the characters and they're about to take a drink of water. And the audience is like, oh no, don't do that. And it like really adds to the tension. I almost feel like you can't really have that same experience, both as an audience and as a player, if you don't let the characters in on that. And so it's almost, and especially I've learned this playing Blades in the Dark with Binary, that telling people more information, even though their characters might know, isn't always a bad thing, as long as there is an understanding that you should have the characters still be true to what they know, and have the story play out with the players' help.
Yeah, 100%.
I think the wrinkle in that is that if you have multiple players and a player has a secret, it's only the GM and that player that should know that secret.
Yeah. There's definitely, there's a line. You don't want to tell them everything.
Yeah. So each player has their own deal with the GM, their own little secret, which is basically just a way of the GM going like, oh, you want to go this direction? Great. I'm going to include this thing you like. Here's my offer. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's cool. That kind of stuff could happen. Great. I'm going to kind of spin that a little bit. And it's this. And that's how I take those moments as a GM.
I think it's also on, I think it helps a lot when you, as a GM, if you are explaining how the NPCs are thinking, even though it's not something that the characters would know or even like really make sense all the time, but being like, the giant demon detective decides to throw you across the room because he doesn't want to kill you. He just wants to send a message, and if you say those things like point blank, then both the audience, if you're playing an actual play, or the players are like, oh, I get it, and whereas if you just said he throws you across the room, they might be like, huh, okay. Yeah. I mean, he seems like a pretty badass guy. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so when you like kind of like explicitly say the intentions and what they're thinking, he that NPC thinks back to when, he sees that there's a young boy dying on the side of the road, and he thinks about back when his younger brother was killed by a loose bullet on the streets of Night City, and now he like bends down and starts crying next to him, and you're like, oh, that's so awesome. Otherwise you just hear the NPC runs over it and takes care of this little boy who he has nothing to do with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. I get that idea, and that's what's so cool about being a game master. There's so many times where one example for one way of playing works, but then I can give you 1,000 other examples where it doesn't work. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
yes,
definitely.
For example, I agree with everything that you said about giving them a little bit more information, more than they would have known, just to add flavor to the story. But then there's also the idea that I don't want to put my players in a position where they have meta knowledge that they're forced to forget, like for the sake of the game, even though they might be able to handle it. I'm still like kind of like the surprise is over. You know what I mean? And I live for their surprise and their shock too. So I hold back as much information as I can sometimes, just because I don't want even though my players could probably separate the ideas like between their characters and the information I gave them, I don't want to put them in that position. I just want them to play it as their characters, like method acting style, like just be in that character and not worry about anything else. You know what I mean?
Because it does feel so good. It feels so good when your players go, oh, I get it. And you're like, yes, you got it.
Yeah. I was listening to a TikTok. I don't know what this show is called. It's one of those like highly produced D&D shows, and like actual plays. And he was talking about how he was playing D&D with a group of people that had never played before. This is their first time ever playing. They're 3 hours into the session, and something happens. Like they were just joking around, having laughs, yeah, I seduced the bartender, ha ha ha, whatever, all the bullshit that you do when you first start playing. And then it came to a point where something serious happened, like an NPC did something that all of them hated, and they all just like got quiet, and then they just said, that NPC is gonna pay. Like it made, they were like, we have to like enough fun in games, enough laughing and doing stupid checks. Like we're getting serious D&D right now. This NPC needs to die. And he was talking about how that's like the beauty of the game. It's like you'll be laughing at 1 second, and then you'll take something so seriously that innately is just like, we're rolling dice and pretending to be people. That's what it is innately, but we still take it so seriously. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I think that was Brennan Lee Mulligan.
Yeah.
From Dimension 20.
That's what it was. Yeah. He was on some kind of podcast. I saw it on TikTok. So yeah, he said something like that.
He's a master.
Yeah.
Actually, so Binary, how have you kind of taken, the more, the philosophy of like creating for a audience and taking that into your home games, or vice versa?
I love having surprises for home games. When it comes to actual plays, the last thing I want is to throw something at a player and for it to be a choice that is definitely not a good one. That I never want to put on my players, because on my recorded players, because on a tabletop I'd be like, oh yeah, sure, let's just do it. You don't like that? That's fine. I'm going to get rid of it. I can do that in an actual play, but it means we can't record that day.
Yeah.
So there are, I think if you're making an actual play, there are some sacrifices you have to make, which is really nice when you play a home game and you can just kind of let that go.
Yeah, you can let it go. You can just, whatever thing they want to explore, we can explore it. There's an element of this episode being like, be careful of doing actual plays. Yeah.
Because it ruins bits of
TTRPGs. It takes away some of the fun aspects of like home games, the home games, the way God intended it is just with pizza and cigarette breaks and stuff like that.
You've streamed stuff on Twitch. You know what I'm talking about if I say this. When you stream on Twitch, there's an element of sometimes when you've played a game for an audience that you can't, like if it's narratively based, you can't really carry on playing it because they want to see it too. Yeah. Even if they're going to watch an VOD or something. And so if you try and take Twitch seriously, you may have watched some videos where it's like, here's some advice on Twitch and a really catchy thumbnail, and you're like, cool, I'm going to click on that, and you watch these things, and every now and again, one of them says some of the best advice I've ever heard: have a game for yourself.
Yeah.
And so if you're playing an actual play, make sure you have a home game where you can do the stuff that takes too long, do the stuff that's not interesting to listen to, but is so much fun to do. Have the discussion over 45 minutes, as long as everyone's into it, about a rule, and be like, I mean, yeah, but our party is this way. That's okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Make sure if you are going to do an actual play that you have a home game where you don't do all of the editing, where you do go through the long process if you want to.
Yeah.
I think that's the important thing. Like with Blades, we took like a 30-minute bio break once.
Yeah.
Like, no, we got to do a bunch of stuff. I can carry on in 30 minutes. All right, everybody, let's just take half an hour break.
Yeah.
I played a video game.
Yeah. The hang is a big thing too, you know, like anytime we were ready to record an actual play, it was like a schedule. It was like these 2 hours, once it's done, I got to go. And we didn't have time to like sit there. If we're in a scene that we just want to sit and talk about it, you know what I mean? We couldn't just sit there and talk about it. We had to like move. We could say a few things and then move along. Like we can't just sit in it. But one thing I will say that I learned to do is, because I didn't want everything to rely on my main plot, I wanted my stories to have players to have a little bit of creativity in the story. So basically what I would do is I would leave the cliffhanger plot point, like things that they can adjust, to the end of the episode. So they make like a big decision at the end of the episode, and now I have a week or 2 weeks to try to figure out how to modify the rest of the story according to what they decided to do.
There are three. If you're not watching the video version, there are two GMs, me and Spoon, going, nodding.
Preach.
Absolutely.
I thought they were going to give me an award.
No, we might. I'll find one somewhere. This is a stuffed fox.
Oh,
well done.
There you go. No, that's so, like, being able to know where your players are going to go next, like, if you're a new GM, like, that is absolutely key. Like, that's the one thing that you learn pretty early on.
And for your players, a cliffhanger at the end of a session makes them want to come back.
Yeah.
And makes them remember where they were.
Yeah, and put your conclusions to things in the middle of sessions. Start the next thing that they're going to go to, their introduction to it, and if they don't bite, bring something new next time.
Yeah, exactly. You got to bring something new. You can't. I had this one D&D story arc where they went to this town. My whole campaign was homebrew, and they went to this town where it was like a Silk Road, Saudi Arabian bazaar type of thing going on. But the main attraction at that place was this dungeon that they went into, unbeknownst to them, to the party, is actually the top of the dungeon disappears, and then they see this giant stadium of people watching them go through this dungeon, and it's like a spectator sport of watching people go through this dungeon.
Cool.
It had like an announcer. Great. Yeah, it was great. We had the players loved it. They're like, "This is amazing. I love it." They were laughing, and I was like, "Okay, we're here in the dungeon. Next episode, we're playing the dungeon." Well, the gag of being in the game show and that feature, it kind of lost its flavor because we were happy about it last session. Now it's like, okay, it's like an old thing now. So we went through that, and then I made the huge mistake of staying in the dungeon a third time. A third time we came back, and they're like, yeah, we're still, I guess we have to get through this dungeon, but we're kind of tired of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I didn't think to myself, you know what? I should have wrapped it up last episode, got him out of the dungeon. And I think midway through our third episode, I was like, you guys find a secret door that just like wasn't supposed to be there. A maintenance guy accidentally left it open, and you guys walk out of that dungeon and have this like epic boss fight. And they're like, okay, this is much better. But yeah, I had to put that bullshit like secret door there. You know what I mean?
But that almost works. It's almost like, you know, like you introduce the whole, you know, like a Truman Show aspect of things. And then, but as soon as, you know, you can kind of peek behind the curtain, you're looking at all the behind the scenes stuff, then it's a whole new thing.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like just an evolution of that original idea.
Yeah,
That's great.
Now
actually.
they went to like disrupting a well-placed, established show that's like there, like people are there watching it. It's a stadium full of people, and this party is like causing chaos and destroying something that's been there before they were even there. You know what I mean?
That's awesome, actually.
Yeah,
I
that's
love
very
that.
cool. I like that. That's
Yeah.
And that
very
kind of
neat.
ties into the whole like learning, like taking things from actual plays and bringing to your home game. Like I think that's one thing that I'm sure all of us have learned, and that is like pacing.
Mm-hmm.
Pacing is so
Hard.
important when
Yeah.
you're
It's
creating.
also hard.
It's very
It's also
difficult.
very hard.
So difficult.
Yeah, it's
So
very hard.
hard.
It's hard to know if you're doing the right kind of pacing, if you're going too fast, too slow, and whether. And now you're worried about two different audiences being bored. It's your players and the audience that's actually listening.
And also, you when making like an actual play, you can get in your head of like it has to be action all the time. It really doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
If you have action all of the time, if it's always high stakes stuff, you're going to burn out people mentally. They need a minute to like, who are these people?
Yeah.
How do they do a normal thing? Like, how do they go shopping?
Yeah.
Make that cool. Shopping
Yeah.
can be cool.
My favorite. Now we're going to Warhammer as we promised. My favorite parts of the Black Library series of Warhammer books, because I'm huge into the Warhammer lore. I didn't know that I would be so into it, but I just can't stop reading all the books.
I'm more of a Necromunda 40k kind of guy, but I'm with you. Yeah, continue.
Yeah. Sorry, it's 40k is what I'm talking about.
Oh, you're talking 40k. All right, cool.
I'm
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
40k. I'm talking Warhammer 40k, Horus Heresy novels and stuff. I listen to all of them on Audible. But anyway, what I meant to say is the best parts of those books are not what people call in the community bolter porn, where it's like, you know, guns exploding. There's one book where it was literally like 15 minutes of exposition on a space battle between like frigates and, you know, Gloriana classes firing high capacity rounds. And I'm like, dude, this is boring. You know what I mean? Yeah. Describing an action scene is cool for like the first few sentences, but you've lost me. I want to hear the drama between the characters that have like this father-son element going on. They're soldiers, they're brothers, tragedy. Those are the fun parts of the books. You know what I mean? The action's important, but it's not the fundamental fun part of the book.
Yeah, I think that that kind of goes like, I think that when people are like, yeah, well, I'm going to make an actual play, they're like, oh, I'm going to make like a TV show or like a movie, but that's not really right. You're making an audiobook. And much more like how I'm like, yeah, like John Wick makes for a great movie.
Yeah.
Mad Max Fury Road, great movie. Try turning that into like an audio play, or try turning that into a novel. Like, it's just going to be like he shoots, the other guy shoots, bang, bang, bang,
over the head, on the side kick, pushes him through the wall. Yeah, it's so boring, so boring.
And if you've ever like read a book like that, you know that like the interpersonal stuff, like the drama, like will they or won't they, is way more interesting than will he hit or will he miss.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So I did listen to your podcast a little bit. I listened to for sure. I love what you guys are doing. I love the kind of editing that's going on. I didn't catch combat, so I wanted to ask you, how do you deal with combat as far as like, do you let it just play out exactly how it's supposed to, or so how do you deal with it?
The first big combat that the players have is in episode 3. It's in Shack Attack, and that's...
Great name.
Thanks. Almost every episode of the podcast has a pun in it as a title, great. So enjoy that, everyone. I love puns. It came with my British passport. I have to complete a number of puns per week. It's very important.
There's a quota.
Yeah, a pun punch card, if you will. But jokes aside, I truncate it. Like there are a lot of, I kill the time between. Oh, yep. Let me just look for that skill. Which one is it? No, gone. Will very much have like a, if someone rolls, someone will say, I'm going to shoot him like this. And maybe they roll a crit. I'll go, cool. You want to change what happens? Because that's cool. And we might actually put that in the podcast, but more often than not, we don't. Instead, I'll replace me saying, you hit him with like a sound instead. Things like that, where we try and just move it along by taking out a lot of the dead air. But still playing that And then if you roll well, if you roll really well, you get to kind of re-describe what you do and be like, actually, let's do this. And I'll cut out the other stuff just to speed it up.
Yeah.
There's still, I think I found a good way of still keeping you rolled so well. How does this happen?
Yeah.
So it still feels like a fluid conversation. Because it's essentially just a bunch of people saying a bunch of cool movie shit that they've done with some sound effects in the background while their voices move around in the stereo field. That's what we're doing. It sounds really dumb. Mm-hmm. I think it's very entertaining.
Yeah,
but we just truncate it, is what I mean.
I love the thing that you said where you say like, explain to me how you did it. You know, like we all know you rolled well, so just tell me what you did. And the players will give you some like Jackie Chan action movie kind of sequence, and then you can give them the satisfaction of saying, yeah, it worked. Like the thing that you did totally worked exactly how you said it, and his head got blown off, and it looked amazing.
And in our podcast, you get the added bonus of having Binary add sound effects to it.
Yeah,
so when you're listening back on it a few weeks later, you're like, oh yeah, look at that. There's the head exploding sound effect.
There was a choice made by one of the players, Jade, who's playing Iona, and Iona doesn't have a high skill in heavy weapons at all. And they were carrying around a flamethrower that they found in the backpack, like 3 shots, like this.
Yeah.
And one of the fun things we made with the flamethrower, which came out of us just messing around, is like, oh, there's a show-off button. It doesn't use any fuel, but you look really cool. And when you push it in the episode, it's like there's a guitar riff, and you're like, it's just really dumb.
That's cool.
But we enjoyed like messing around a little bit with the narrative stuff. Like you'd imagine a company would have a demo button, and it would make you look dope so that you would buy the fucking flamethrower. The problem is that Iona has a terrible skill. And this is, I think, I will guess, this is how we met, is this tweet. Because the wonderful people who make this game seem to like this moment. And there was another podcast mentioned in that tweet. I've forgotten who they are, and I feel really bad. But in that, they talked about Iona uses personal grooming with the flamethrower and justifies it in a way that I think I literally say in the episode, yeah, I'm going to allow this bullshit.
Yeah,
and I kept that in.
Hell yeah.
Because giving your players the agency to say, like, look, if you come up with something brilliant, you can bullshit your way out of this because it's fun for you. It's fun for me as a GM. And that means it's definitely going to be fun for our players, for our listeners as well.
Oh yeah, that's my soft spot. If you do something cool, I don't care. I'm like on your side to make it happen.
Every time.
+2 to your dice roll. I'll fudge the numbers. I don't care. I want it to happen just
I rolled a 1. Oh no.
Exactly. By the way, I was gonna say that a demo button on a flamethrower that does like a guitar riff and stuff. That's cyberpunk as fuck, dude.
I know, right?
That's what cyberpunk is all about. Style over substance.
I spent 45 minutes making the sound just right for that. I just wanted it to be so good.
That's funny. That's great. Yeah, that's fun.
Out of curiosity, I mean, like, obviously we're on a cyberpunk podcast. Like, what is it about the Cyberpunk Red or Cyberpunk 2020 system that draws you into it so much?
Well, first of all, I would say that even though this is a cyberpunk podcast, I think a lot of things that we talked about are universal truths about tabletop gaming. That's a lot of the things that I learned about tabletop gaming are from content creators outside of cyberpunk, from D&D channels, Starfinder. They've all taught me so many things. And basically what I really love about cyberpunk is it feels so close to home. I can really feel connected to the players and connected to the characters. The life path system is amazing.
Oh, I love it.
It's such a great way to tell a story before you even start telling a story. Before we start day 1, before we even start session 0, we already have a story for your character, and you're like, oh man, I can't wait to tell them how I used to be in an Arasaka training program against my will. I escaped with my twin sister, and she went to Night City, I went to Texas, and we haven't spoke to each other in 5 years. That's an actual story from one of my players in my Patreon game. That's such a cool story just before we even start rolling dice. And yes,
I think that's important.
Yeah, it's
as a player, bring something.
Yeah.
As a GM, that's what I want from you. Mm-hmm. Actually, players out there, bring something. It doesn't matter if it's just a little thing. if there's just one thing about your character, you know, like their favorite thing, their favorite family member, their least favorite thing, maybe a huge story that's pages and pages long that I will skim and try my best to get in my head.
Mm-hmm.
But bring something, please, because it'll be so much more fun if you do.
And Cyberpunk, part of its charm is it helps you whether you're creative or not. You know, I always give my players the chance to, you don't have to roll on the life paths generator or anything. If you want to do it yourself and like come up with a cool story, we'll make it work. I actually encourage that. But if you don't care to do that and you'll let the chaos of the dice, you know, determine your character, we can still make a really cool story just from the results from all the chaotic rolling. And you're forced to bring something to the table, and it's a part of your character already. You can scrap the character if you want, but I'm 100% of every character that I've ever had in my game, they were 100% involved. The players were involved with the characters. They were like, yeah, this is what I like. And when that character dies, like, everybody's bummed out. Everybody.
Yeah.
And I loathe it. I loathe it when the character dies because it really bums everyone out. And we're so invested. I'm more invested in my Cyberpunk characters than I ever was in any of the D&D characters and stuff like that. So I think that's what I really love about Cyberpunk, is it's so close to our world, and there's such potential for telling such a cool story, and it's just fun. You know, there's no
absolutely.
Magic is replaced with technology.
Absolutely. I've got, because you live relatively close to Los Angeles, which is essentially.
I live in LA.
Nights. Oh, you live in LA. Okay, so I do too, and we're in the past of Night City.
Exactly.
Like, No Latency is a pun on a bar in LA called No Vacancy. That's why I named it that. That's me just being dumb.
Where is
like
that
the
in
bar
LA?
person?
Is it in downtown?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
I've been there a few times.
Okay.
Back in the day when we could go to a bar.
In the before time.
and the bar person's called Ping, because latency.
Yeah.
Dumb.
Got it.
Yeah, that's dumb, right?
It's me
just
not
throwing
dumb.
puns.
Don't say that.
But living near the city, and do you find that kind of enhances your ability to see Night City in your mind? Because I do.
Oh yeah, I'll like catch myself like looking at the city, looking at people walking, and think like, what would make this Night City? You know, like that thing would be an automated robot instead of like a guy working there. But pretty much everything else would be the same, except much worse and grim, and the cops like hate you even more. So
God, no.
So it's all the bad things about a city, all the dangerous things, but also all the beautiful charm of the city. And you know, the thing is, like, we like to say that the corporations are the bad guys, and they are the bad guys. 100% they're the bad guys. But goddamn, do they make really cool shit.
Very cool shit.
You know what I mean? And that's part of the charm.
It is. I think that the that's kind of just one of the themes that you can kind of explore in Cyberpunk that you can't in, say, D&D, right? Yeah. And like just having the more sci-fi aspects of, like, you know, that's a great one of being like, they're doing so much bad, but like their products are actually pretty good. And like, how do you reconcile that? Like, how do you reconcile, when do you stop becoming yourself and you become a machine? Like, these are all like themes and questions that you can ask and explore in Cyberpunk that you just can't really do unless you heavily modify D&D. And I think that's one of the things that I wish more players and nerds in general, like I feel like D&D has become so iconic and so widespread that it just becomes the role-playing game that everyone plays.
Yeah. And
like, if you want to do a sci-fi, I am so against people going, yeah, but I already know a D&D, I'll just hack it to shit and I'll make it a sci-fi. Like, there are so many great games like Cyberpunk that are literally made to tell those stories.
And the thing is, like, if I ever try to explain people what I do on YouTube, which good luck, I usually tell them like I just make hobby videos, like, and then they keep asking questions. I'm like, God damn it, now I gotta sit here and Explain.
go.
It's so.
I mean, since the video game came out, it's got to be a lot easier to be like, oh, you know that game that Keanu Reeves was in that everyone got really angry about,
Yeah.
but really shouldn't have because it was a lot of work and actually pretty good. Personal opinion.
I thought it was good too. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was great. I also played it on Xbox One X and had it crash 4 times in the entire time I played it. So I don't know. I've been using that as an allegory of being like, hey, do you remember when that came out? And everyone was like, you're beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, that. Yeah. Well, there's a role-playing game. It's made by this guy called Mike Pondsmith, who's a super cool human being and looks like the personification of cool every time I've ever seen him on the internet, ever.
Yeah. But no matter what, it's like 3 degrees of D&D. Like no matter, I'll start with that
sentence.
And then it's like, yeah, the people that
it's
actually
like
made that game were inspired by the tabletop game. And then they're like, tabletop game? And I'm like, okay, have you heard of Dungeons and Dragons? And then they're like, oh, yeah.
Sentence.
That's the sentence. So no matter what, I always have to go to that, which is fine. Like I don't think there should be any like stupid tribalism between games. It's really odd to me. They're all good. They all can teach you things about being a game master. If you play like 5 games of Starfinder, 5 games of D&D, you'll be a better Cyberpunk game master. I guarantee it. No matter what. You're going to learn shit that you're like, oh, that's how they do it. Maybe I can introduce that into my Cyberpunk game in some way, in some fashion. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So
did you were you into Cyberpunk the tabletop before the video game came out?
Yeah. It's actually the first tabletop RPG I ever played. In the early 2000s, my best friend Arnog, shout out. I've never met anybody else named Arnog. He's the only Arnog, and I'm gonna see him tomorrow. So he's still my friend
Arnog.
after all these years.
Hope you're having a good day.
Yeah, he. I knew he was into that kind of stuff, like D&D. I knew he was into into the occult and all. If anybody knew what fucking D&D was, this guy did. You know what I mean? That's what I thought in my mind. So I went up to him and I apologize to my viewers. I've said this story 1,000 times, but I went up to him and I said, "Hey man, have you ever heard of D&D?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Well, I kind of want to try it out. I think it's something I might like." And he's like, "All right, come to my house." So go to his house. And I'm like, all right, we're going to play D&D. And he goes like, listen, John, D&D is for pussies. This is Cyberpunk. And then he drops Cyberpunk 2020. It was the early 2000s, so way before.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, you're the expert. So if you say this is better, then fine. You know better than me. So we played that and loved it. I was like, oh my God, I was like a cop, an undercover, dirty cop. Like it was great. It was a whole cop campaign. And that was the first RPG that I ever played. Then later, I still he's my mentor. So he taught me D&D's for pussies. And I'm like, yeah, I'm never going to play D&D. It sucks. Then I played D&D and I was like, oh man, this is awesome. What are you talking about?
Great.
It's so fun.
For the record, D&D's fucking
so
great.
good.
It's like saying Blade Runner, such a great movie. I hate Star Wars.
Yeah.
I hate Lord of the Rings.
Exactly.
They're like, what?
There's only one movie for me, all right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and then I realized like, oh no, this is obviously there's certain aspects of Cyberpunk that D&D just cannot match. It's a different tone. You're telling a different story. It just feels different.
There's one rule in Cyberpunk that I love, and it's not called face off, but every time I try and remember the name of the rule, I say face off, and then I think of the movie.
Yeah, it is face down.
No, it's face down. That's
face
what it
down.
is.
Yeah. Face off is fine too. I would like totally. Everyone knows.
Oh no,
when
I the first time I called a face down in No Latency, we went on a massive tangent about the movie.
Yes.
It went on for I cut it down to, it was 20 minutes. It's like 20 seconds.
Everywhere.
Oh, it was real bad.
That's funny.
But I love that mechanic so much. That's so smart.
Yeah. It's genius. It's great. I use it
Conversation battle.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
It's basically what it is you use it's reputation. That's what it is. It's you use your and reputation to me when I play Cyberpunk, it's like a fluid stat. Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like you might have a reputation to the Night City Police Department, but you have a reputation 5 to the booster gangs and the underground community because they know more about you than the cops do. So when a cop sees you and they want to say, hey, do I know that guy from somewhere? They got to roll a 1 or a 2. But if a booster gang sees you, they got to roll a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then they'll know who you are. Like, where you're from, not your exact name, but they're like, oh, they're those guys. You know what I mean? So that's what I really love about the reputation system.
Oh man, the face downs are cool.
Face downs are cool. All right, guys. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Spoon. What were you gonna say?
One last thing.
Yeah,
I just wanted to ask.
thing.
I just wanted to ask, like, what are your favorite like cyberpunk movies, TV shows, media that you take inspiration from?
Man, there's so many that it's hard to like. Blade Runner obviously is like, I might be the GOAT, greatest of all time, and I don't even. It's not even one of my favorite cyberpunk movies or genres. It's just like the way this, at the time, it's set a standard for like, this is what it could be. You know, if you make your own cyberpunk world, this is what it could be like. But then there's like other things like The Running Man with Arnold Schwarzenegger that isn't really like, it's not cyberpunk per se. You're not like in a cyberpunk setting in the city. But it has like a cyberpunk aspect of people being so jaded to seeing people dying on TV and like making a show out of people dying and stuff like that, like a gladiatorial thing. That's cyberpunk as fuck. And even the Mad Max series is cyberpunk because
it's the Badlands.
It's the Badlands. It's
just the Badlands.
Outside of the city, that's what it is. It's Mad Max all outside of the city. That's how I imagine it. Like at least in pockets and stuff like that.
Yeah, I do. I have pockets and stuff too.
Yeah. So there's so that's what I love about cyberpunk because it has so many aspects to it. You could even do like the gritty like mobster drama aspect. You could have a mobster drama campaign set in a cyberpunk world and it works. You can have a cop campaign where everybody's cops, everybody's trauma team, everybody's SWAT. You could have
like Judge Dredd is so good. Like the movie Dredd.
That's a great one. The newest one. Oh my god,
it's so good.
So good. Carl Urban, dude, needs to do that again. And but yeah, so basically there's so many to count, but that's just, and then video games too. There's a lot of really good video games.
Oh, so many.
Yeah. Deus Ex, there's an old one called Flashback. Have you guys heard of that?
Yes.
It's from the creators of Prince of Persia, the original OG
old Flashback
computer.
The game is so hard.
It's ridiculous. I watched the playthrough of it. And
it's like, when you get hit, you die, period.
Yeah, you die. And like you're supposed to pick up things that you could barely see. It's like a small pixel on the screen. And if you didn't pick it up, then you're not going to progress.
It's very good.
But yeah, it's one of those old school games. But yeah, what about you guys?
Well, Dredd, definitely.
Yeah.
I watched that movie, and then I'm a pretty big comic guy, and so I was like, wait a minute, is this based on a comic? It feels like it's based on a comic, and sure enough, it totally is. And for a long-running comic,
very
actually.
long, yes,
very long, like since
British,
the 70s,
right?
Sorry.
Is it British?
British, yeah, absolutely, it is British.
It is British, yes, it is, yes.
Just like,
like many good things are. Hello,
of course. IT crowd.
But like IT crowd,
right?
Yes,
love IT crowd.
Dear fire department, fire.
Dear God, no, but that movie like totally got me into the whole aesthetic and like diving back into the annals of the Judge Dredd comic is great and is so cyberpunk, but in the over-the-top goofy way that, by the way, if you just watch the 2012 Dredd movie, you're not going to get the like goofiness of it, but like the comic is wacky and hilarious because it just is the like essentially it's what the British look at the US and go, these guys are just ridiculous. And it's making fun of the US
and
in
it's
a comic
funny
book.
like
very much
it's so well done that I didn't think it was making fun of us. It was just like this is great, I love it.
Like it's a totalitarian regime of police people. Like
we also, the Sylvester Stallone one is not too bad either. That has like,
it's really not. It's real super cheesy.
Dude, he says grenade into the gun and it says grenade back, and then he fires a grenade out of his pistol. That's fucking cool,
ridiculous. It's very cool.
Yeah. So.
I'd go with like RoboCop. I think that's a good one. Back to the Future. Surprisingly, there's some cool shit you can grab from that
for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Video game wise, there are too many to count. I'm a huge Fallout fan.
Oh, I love Fallout.
But I always love artificial intelligence stories. They tickle me something rotten. I love AI stuff. 2001 Space Odyssey. There's stuff you can pull from that, even though it's not fully cyberpunk. Like those kind of things inspire me, that kind of stuff. And there's a new game that just came out, Scarlet Nexus. I'm really interested in the way that they're telling a near future story, because instead of using tech stuff, it's all about tech enhanced psychic powers, which is an interesting twist, and it's something that I'm enjoying going through.
Yeah, my favorite.
Akira. Gotta love Akira.
Oh yeah, Akira's classic.
Oh, Akira, duh. Yeah, I mean,
yeah. I mean, that's like one of those staple. Like, if you were to make a list, it's on there for sure.
Oh yeah,
like top 5. But I was gonna say my favorite depiction of an AI has to be the Star Trek Next Generation Data. The Data as an android. I think a lot of people have done it, and a lot of people have done it great. I even liked iRobot, which is kind of like a cheesy Will Smith movie, but it's still pretty cool.
I liked iRobot.
Yeah, but I loved watching Data like evolve and learn things and teach lessons about humanity back to us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As a robot. So like those are like really fun aspects of it too.
And how smart it was to not give him emotions from the beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
That was genius.
Yeah.
But he learns emotions. Anyway, that's
the whole thing. Watch Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Exactly. That's what this podcast is all about, all right? We're a Star Trek podcast.
We're just
now.
wrecking stuff now. We're just gonna go watch this. This movie is good. This comic is British, so it's great.
Well, hey guys, this was an absolute blast. We got to do this again for sure.
Yes, please.
I think just sitting chatting about GM stuff should be something that we should do often, because I like doing this. Before we go, make sure you guys plug everything. Let's plug No Latency again.
Cool. Anchor.fm/No Latency is our website, but we're available on every podcast service. Go and check us out. No Latency.
No space latency. Easy to remember.
And then it's twitch.tv/binary dragon, all one word.
Binary_dragon. Don't go to the regular one. He hasn't streamed for years.
There you go. So that's how you know it's not the right one.
Yeah, I stream every week.
Yeah, there you go. Make sure you guys shoot them a follow. Thank you guys so much for coming along. I really appreciate it.
No, we really appreciate it, and thank you for inviting us on. I really like reaching out, because we're a lot smaller than you are, and we really have a fun story to tell, and we'd love for people to come and listen.
Hey man,
see you in Night City.
I'm not a size queen. I don't care about size.
No king shame in this house.
Yeah,
apparently.
Exactly. Wow. No, I mean honestly, I genuinely am a fan of Cyberpunk and tabletop gaming. And anytime I see somebody trying to make content out there, I will always support them, and I'll always support you guys. I'm always rooting for you guys. I wish you nothing but success and happiness and good health. And this is just the beginning of a friendship.
I hope so. I really do. I wouldn't have reached out to you if I didn't really appreciate the content you make. It's bloody brilliant.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I really do. Well, if my good content has brought us together, then it's good for something.
Right.
So there you go. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Have a good one. We'll see you guys on the next one as I play the outro music. Take care. Goodbye.
Thanks again.
We can't hear the music, so we'll just keep waving.
Just keep waving. Just keep waving.
This is it. I'll use both hands. Bye, everyone.